Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. A hardcover book for $5 in pristine condition at my local comic book shop. I never want to tell you guys what my local comic book shop is. You'll go and buy up all the stuff before I can get it. So, Goya, the Terrible Sublime. This is a nice spooky Halloween season kind of book. I picked it up, of course, because Goya, the artist, to be frank, I don't know that much about Goya. I just kind of got like the superficial paragraph on him in the giant art history textbook, but I was always kind of interested by just how powerful his images were and how they kind of gave you a kick in the teeth. And I knew that he was either insane or demon possessed, one of the two, to come up with imagery like that. So I can't comment on the historical accuracy of everything. I can tell that El Torres is referencing a lot of historical data about Goya, but I think he does a good job of just kind of like having those be little interesting comments on other things in Goya's life, and then kind of focusing it on the main theme, which is what if Goya's demons were real, and kind of using Goya as the centerpiece for a horror story. And Fran Galán, I like that he has kind of like a caricature style. I'll turn the page actually and show you this. So I'm guessing Christ and the disciples, but one of the interesting things about Goya is, the variety. Like, he had kind of like his normal time when he was doing all the court painterly stuff. He, of course, had his black paintings and his kind of insane demon paintings where he seemed to be going nuts. And he would also do caricature. And I think Fran Galán's caricature style is a really good fit for this subject matter because he's kind of like identifying the key image, and then he's just kind of like heightening everything and exaggerating everything. So I really dug this. It's going to prompt me to go read some more about Goya. So I thought I would share you just maybe like a couple little points that I think really stood out to me. And then I want to read like the editorial comments. I like doing that generally because I like getting information about the artistic process. For this kind of introduced me to like a whole like subculture I was unaware existed. There's kind of like a subculture of either like horror enthusiasts or occult enthusiasts who kind of look at Goya as maybe like a first artist in the tradition of scary images, which kind of surprised me. So because it's kind of like a new thing and I've never heard of this before, I'm kind of interested to maybe check out this subculture more, because to me Goya is just like the guy from art history, but to them he's like the grandpappy of scary movies. So jumping ahead a little bit. Let's see here. Rafael Marin, writer of Fantastic Four Volume 3, 2000-2001, and The Inhumans, novelist, translator, and scholar. So Marin, it's a little pretentious introduction, just a little bit. He kind of like has this argument like, what if Goya was like the first like forefather of the comics genre? Kinda. I feel like Scott McCloud has kind of like muddied this up a bit, because he'd argue like the Bayeux Tapestry or any like ancient Egyptian art where there's sequential events happening, that's the first comic. And I think for it to be a comic, you have to have a word balloon pointing at a funny little cartoon person. And of course, there's sequential images in art history prior to the emergence of the comic strip. I'm not going to read all this. It's a nice little introduction. He kind of like I think he gets the feel of the artist's how the artist is matched to the medium, and I think he kind of pitches you on the book quite nicely. Though the thing is, it's a pitch on the book if you've already bought the book. But yeah, he kind of gets that they are trying to capture a fictional version of Goya, which includes historical elements, but isn't like bogging you down with a big fat history lesson on Goya. So jumping ahead, the most interesting thing to me is maybe like the comment on art itself, and was Goya insane? Was Goya demon possessed? Or was Goya, I don't know, just maybe like obsessed with, they don't talk about his Christianity that much. They sometimes show a few crucifixes and he'll like say sweet mother of God or something, but they're clearly, I don't know, they're kind of, I think they're maybe de-emphasizing the importance of Christianity in this culture, partially because this was the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. Some people were first starting to like argue that the Bible was too old-fashioned, that we needed to progress beyond that and embrace like the new emerging world of reason that was coming. And basically what's interesting about Goya is, as a romantic, his paintings maybe like show some sort of contradiction or a confusion in the modern world that's terrifying and that we haven't worked out. So his friend, what's his friend's name, some Spanish name I can't pronounce. He says, I think you have a much higher calling. Come, I want to show you something. Art is like an immense sea, dear Goya. In it, some can swim farther than others. Art must be free, as it is visceral, intuitive, born of a place beyond reason. Goya says, no, no, my dear Asensi. That is a nice metaphor, but art, fantasy, abandoned by reason, only produces impossible monsters. No, nothing is impossible. Art is the maximum expression of human freedoms, Goya. Freedom knows no impossibilities. I hope you haven't brought me all this way to show me some nonsense. We've arrived. Allow me to show you the impossible. And then it's the cartoonist rendition of the Witch's Sabbath. So he is taking some liberties. Like, I thought, oh, wow, there's like a cool face in there. And I couldn't see that in Goya's original painting. They do a neat job of kind of like, they're sneaking in Goya paintings and kind of saying that Goya sees his paintings in the world around him. He sees an old lady and he's terrified she might be a witch or a demon. And that kind of becomes like a little image, which later gets built into a painting. And they also do a nice job of kind of like hinting at maybe the demon world that he's witnessing is real. It's something that he's like a rationalist who doesn't believe in God, and yet Satan himself is pursuing him, and he doesn't know what to do about that. Or it could be syphilis, it could be his deafness and his headaches and his heat stroke affecting his mind, and they don't like pick an answer for you of whether it's the logical explanation or the magical explanation. What this is getting at is kind of like this neat philosophical idea about art. No, never mind. So that kind of like sums up the artistic dispute quite nicely. It kind of showcases, like Goya's, faults as a human being. Like he's so interested in his art and in growing his audience that he's not really a very attentive father. I love this. So he's having another one of his fits, and they just use a thick pile of whiteout to indicate his scream, but he's going deaf, so he can't even hear his own words. And you can tell it's a scream just by the violence of the whiteout there, and you can even see the brushstrokes of the whiteout. That's something that wouldn't be possible in kind of like an older medium that's become possible with better printing. There are lots of historical characters. There's kind of like this neat theme throughout of, is he really seeing demons? Is he not? Is it the horrors of war affecting him? Sometimes I think the artist does a great job of like slipping the style around to make things work. So as he becomes more and more obsessed with his demons, sometimes the style will become more and more like a Goya painting to kind of suggest that he's capturing the demons in the world of his painting. He's trapping them so they can't haunt his mind anymore. I loved it. So jumping ahead. All right. Francisco de Goya y Lucientes, Master of Terror by Alejandro Romero, with notes by El Torres. So what's interesting about this to me is kind of like, it's like bibliography mining. So if you get like a good, art history textbook, it might only have a paragraph on an artist, but it'll probably list like 10 great books on this old obscure artist you really like who isn't that famous. So you bibliography mine to go find like the 10 books you need to read about that one artist you really like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this and I'm going to kind of call attention to like the inspirations or the subject matters that might be worth digging into and going exploring. Okay, I changed my mind. It's a really long-winded essay and it's kind of hard to follow. The too long didn't read version is Romero argues that Goya has a really important place in the history of horror. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like run through this breakneck speed and kind of like identify the names of interesting people they mentioned. Because that's almost kind of what the essay is. It's a long list of interesting movies and names for you to check out. So the Penguin Encyclopedia of Horror and the Supernatural Entry on Goya, written by Carl Woodring. Colossus by Clive Barker. Philosophy of Horror or Paradoxes of the Heart by Noel Carroll. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror, Scott's Alien, Romero's Night of the Living Dead, H.R. Geiger's airbrush paintings, and Goya as part of that tradition. Colossus by Clive Barker, again, based on 2 Goya paintings. The Books of Blood by Barker, jumping down, The Dark Fantastic by Douglas E. Winter. Some more people I don't know. Ramsey Campbell, jumping down. There's so much stuff. Okay, they talk about Edgar Allan Poe a lot, which is kind of interesting. So I know Edgar Allan Poe, like famous story writer, and they argue that Poe and Goya kind of, what Goya is to art, Poe is to the written word. Vincent Price, They talk about kind of like the effect of horror in Edgar Allan Poe. Required reading: The Beautiful Cigar Girl, Mary Rogers, Edgar Allan Poe, and the Invention of Murder by Daniel Stashower. You're welcome. Chicho Ibanez Serrador's 1967 Stories to Stay Awake, The Raven. Stuart Gordon for the second season of Masters of Horror, The Black Cat. Castle of Blood by Sergio Corbucci and Antonio Margheriti. Los Desastres de la Guerra by Mario Camus, kind of focusing on the war itself that affected Goya. A Goya movie in 1985. I don't know if they mentioned the name of the director of that. Jose Ramon Larraz, that's the director. Luis Buñuel or Orson Welles, Confidential Report. Luis Buñuel wanted to make a Goya movie but didn't get to make it. Jumping ahead. I don't know who this guy is. Menendez Pidaled, or Menendez Pidal, and they mention him a few times. I have no idea why they're mentioning him. That's one of my problems with the writing style is I'm not quite following the argument. They're basically like horror nerds, and they're dropping all of these like movie names I don't know. Goya's sketchbooks. Ortega in Writings on Velázquez and Goya. El Enigma Goya, Dr. Francisco Alonso Fernandez. The Follies and the Blank Paintings are two series by Goya. Gaspar Gomez's de la Sera in his book Goya y su España. Jumping ahead. Okay, they had this whole little... I've talked about this before. Like, when you overthink fantasy, you kind of spoil the fun of fantasy. Like, if someone came along and said, Lord of the Rings is all about aliens, I would hate them forever. Like, you don't need Lord of the Rings to make sense in a realistic sci-fi universe. It's a fantasy. The whole point of the fantasy is to evoke an old fantasy world. So they've got this idea that later people would try to, like, map out or make logical the horror world of Poe or Goya, and it's actually much less interesting than the initial mysterious horror world when you try to like systematize it and explain it all. They also illustrate it with Chicho Ibanez Serrador's version of The Raven. They find that more interesting than Edgar Allan Poe's The Philosophy of Composition, because they argue that Poe claims that he wrote The Raven kind of using this sort of systematic process, and they don't buy it. They think that an idea like The Raven has to like come at you and terrify you. You can't just sit down and come up with a terrifying idea using a logical, like, top 10 ways to write terrifying English romantic poetry in 10 easy steps, right? They think it's a bit more primal than that. They talk about Goya and the Deaf Man's Villa, Menendez Pidal again, who I don't know. All these names, they just drop these names, I don't know who they are. Ramon and Fernandez Flores, Ralph Barbie, or Paul Nashi, Jancito Molina, Clive Barker, and then he talks about how good this book is and how it's sort of like this is the next great take on Goya, and it deserves its own movie adaptation. Okay, so a whole bunch of movie makers and artists in Spanish culture. I don't know. I want to take a look at El Torres' notes. Promotional black and white drawing showing Goya in his studio. I really like El Torres. A key element to the story was giving a new look at the relationship between Goya and the Duchess of Alba. Our portrayal of Maria Teresa, we were inspired by the actress Eva Green, was almost as important as that of Goya himself, if not more. We began construction from the roof down. First, we needed an illustration, a cover page to orient ourselves as to which way we were heading. The basic idea was there. We got it on the first go, but later we significantly changed Goya's character, which in this attempt seemed to us a little too mutant. So they did kind of tone it down. This is a bit more like Scary Stories, Marvel horror comics, Tales of Suspense kind of image, and they went for a bit more of a subtle, like the demons are there scratching at the inside, but he's never quite sure. Above, we'll never know exactly what Madrid's Calais del Desagno looked like in 1794. I'm sorry, Spaniards, I don't know what these things mean, but there is enough documentation for us to conjure up an image. Following page. Oh, I love this. A sample of the process Fran Galán employed in these pages. Here the recreation of the Witch's Sabbath painting. Getting the right colors and tones on par with the original piece was a titanic endeavor on his part. I love the variety in this, from like more muted and painterly to more creepy with a bright highlight to kind of a combination of the two, and maybe just a subtle change between green and blue and the two of them. All of his like character sketches and his process of blue line, inks, grays, flats, and then kind of moody, warm colors brought into the final. And of course in this too. Black, flats, candle, light, increases the lighting effects, kind of adds maybe like a reflection to the room, and then adds mood lighting to everything to really make them punch. Previous page, several digital sketches, some rejected, of various characters. King Charles IV, prior to the portrait of the whole family. One of the main characters, Josepha Bayou, Goya's wife in her witching mode, there she is, and a phantom, based precisely on Goya's whimsy. We can also see the process Fran Galán used on every single page in the vignette where Goya finally confronts his demons. Above, one of the most complicated vignettes to reconstruct, inasmuch as this hall in Moncloa Palace no longer exists, and where we can see the thoroughness of Fran's work, from digital sketch, moving through flat colors, light phases, and shadows to arrive at the final lighting and feel. To say the least, between reconstructing the frames and the feel of the era, Fran suffered a lot. And then this kind of, I really like this, a reflection of Goya with the candles on his hat to light his painting, and a door with a mysterious shadow on it, and the demons kind of behind his painting almost emerging and holding onto his palette. Another promotional sketch we rejected because it did not reflect the overall style used to draw in the story. I love the image of the candles on the top hat used as lighting to paint. I now regret not having used it in the script. Goya, the Terrible Sublime, has been a journey for us. Arduous at times, but always exciting. We hope you enjoyed it. So, this is a keep forever book for me. I mean, for me, there's like the whole art history dimension of it. It's a little weird and hard to follow at places, I think on purpose. You might have to be a Goya nerd. I'm not even enough of a Goya nerd to catch all the historical references, but I'm going to defend it on the basis that I think this is a weird horror story, and so that basic feeling of unease and being unsettled is important to it. And it does have like an interesting... It has a beginning and middle and an end, and it makes sense in spite of like the weird, confusing portions where he's wrestling with his demons. So really unique, really impactful. It reminds me of Typex's Rembrandt, but I might actually like this one a little bit better as far as comic book adaptations of artists go, because it's got a nice little, single point to it. Definitely a horror comic, and definitely not for the kids. So this has been your Spooky Scary Skeletons comic book fan review. I love you guys. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you later.